Hi everybody, welcome to our final video of a beastly celebration from the fairy tale courtyard. Erica is making tea and will be with us in just a minute, and hopefully everybody can find the stream. We had a last minute time change, and so I know that original link isn't working, but I'm hoping this will just pop up on the page. So we'll just hang out. Let me know if you're here. Drop me a comment so I know that you found us. And we'll hang out a minute, give people a chance to find the stream since we changed the time. Erica's making her tea. For those of you not familiar with time differences, Ireland, and I think most, if not all of Europe, has already done daylight savings. The US, where I'm at, has not. So for Erica to be at her normal time, the US needed to bump back an hour, and my schedule's a little bit more flexible than hers, so we went with that. Yay, Laura's here. She says she's on the road, so might go through some dead zones. I hope that you'll be able to stay here. Oh, here's Erica, looking fabulous. Oh my goodness.
Where am I? There I am.
Yes, yeah, so it being our final beastly celebration, of course we had to break out the yellow dress, right? So mine it's a flapper dress, but of course you can't see like the fun fringe happening at the bottom because we're on camera. But yeah, I bought it for a flapper party we were supposed to be going to in Vegas. It's cold here right now, so I'm also wearing like pajama pants. So I'm very stylish right now. I know. Erica's always like, no, don't tell them. And I'm like, nah, it's fine. So mine's the flapper version, and then Erica's looks more traditional. Tell us about your dress.
Well, mine is from Disneyland itself. You can see it's got the picture in case you didn't know whose dress it was. Only years ago when I first went to Disneyland, it's age 12. It didn't fit me when I bought it. It certainly doesn't fit me now. It's not designed for a bust, let's put it that way. So I'm pinned in at the moment, but the skirt looks nice. Which again, you can't see because we're on video. And so I'm trying to just get myself centered on this camera. There we go.
Go for it. It's always a trick there. Yeah, so we were joking earlier. You really only have to look good from like the shoulders up. It's a very unique fashion to work on this. And yeah, Laura, thank you, says bells of the ball.
Oh, nice.
Spelled with the double E. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, excited to break out the yellow dresses. I'm really excited to talk about Gabby's full version of Beauty and the Beast because, oh my gosh.
So it turns out what we read the first week, which we thought was Gabby's version, was Andy's version. Andrew Lang's chop abridged version.
Yeah.
And those of you who watched, we had lots of questions. There were plot holes that were not explained. Yes, they were, if you read the second half of the book.
The entire second half. So Andrew Lang, when he abridged it, only took the first half of the story. It's very reminiscent of Sleeping Beauty. Love the mug. That's fantastically on theme.
Never used before. Just took it out of the box for today's call.
Special, yes.
At least it's been sitting in a box for 18 years because, I couldn't possibly use my beautiful bell mug. But today I could.
For a special occasion, yes, I know. I was trying to think if I had like a fancy teacup or something, and no, we've got the A mug. So
I'm trying to keep my head forward so you can see the fact I've got my silly top knot for my bell bun.
Perfect, yeah.
It's going to fall down shortly. But anyway.
Yes.
Oh, and there it's gone. Never mind.
So just like Perrault's Sleeping Beauty, we know a part of the story, but the original has this more expanded, whole other thing that's going on, and that's what's happening here. And it's actually very good. I enjoyed it a lot. And oh my gosh, so much happens.
Like we were commenting on this earlier today, like there's enough for 5 separate fairy tale type stories.
Yes.
In just let me just tell you a few bits of backstory. You're like, what? Don't just gloss over this. This is important.
What is this whole other world? Oh my goodness. Yeah, so let's give, and Laura mentions that plot holes that show up in the Disney version, which is of course based on this. We get
again, it's based on the English translation, which is Lang's chopped up version.
Yeah, so there are answers. There's enough for like a whole epic fantasy type series here. We're gonna do our best to recap. I really would recommend reading this one.
Oh yeah. It's worth the investment. Now,
Yeah.
if you've read Andrew Lang's version already, you can probably skip forward to about the halfway point. Belle kisses the beast, you know, or she promises to marry him, and he is restored.
Yeah, there's more depth of character though. There's like some interesting things going on in the first bit as well.
There's a couple of differences that I noticed. One is the fact that when she goes back home, it's not that her sisters are already married to the witty but cruel and the handsome but vain. No, they're not married yet. And both of her sister's suitors, and interestingly, though she has 5 sisters, we only talk about 2 of them, both of those turn around and say, "Oh, Belle, hi. Well, seeing as you're here now, can I marry you instead?" And it's just like, hello, we're practically engaged. Like,
yeah, so she tries to put them off, and they just are following her. So the sisters get angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, not angry with their unfaithful lovers. No, angry with their sister. For how dare she be so pretty that she could steal our men from us?
Yeah,
she doesn't want them, girls. It's not her fault.
It's still a fairly toxic sister dynamic, but they have like more things have happened, right? There's like more reasoning behind it.
Yes.
And the brothers are still just hanging out. They don't go join the army. They're just hanging out on the farm.
So there was one inconsistency I noticed, because it seemed in the first part that the brothers were younger than her and they kind of looked up to her. But in the second half, it says that she is the youngest child. So there was something not quite working out with the ages again.
I was a little bit confused. Maybe we just have a lot of sets of twins or something. Like we talked about, this is
I think we're probably talking about triplets or quadruplets. But I mean, kind of, I'd have to say, if you've just had twins or triplets, would you really be saying, let's have a few more because we've only got 7?
A lot of children. Yeah, like, and it was interesting in the first part, and even in the second part, a little bit of this. She references some Greek mythology. She says the prince is as beautiful as Cupid, and then later on she talks about Echo. But I was like, oh, I think we have a stronger case now for there being some inspiration drawn here.
Yeah, and it says in kind of the author notes, or rather the notes about the author, that her influences include Charles Perrault and mythology from Greek mythology time, the kind of classical harking back. So yeah, it's quite probably that it was featured in some way, though it still leaves out the whole quest to save the husband, having to do the trials and so forth, because that's not really perfect.
We have that with the other, hi Miriam, with one of the other couples that we'll get to, but with the fairy and the king, the fairy ends up going on some quests for her husband.
That is true. So
and that to me was really psyche.
So that is true, yeah. So here's the problem. No one has any names. We've got Beauty, we've got Beast, then we have the king, the queen, the other queen, the fairy queen, the fairy sister who's also a fairy who is a queen but is not the fairy queen. And I'm really like, seriously, could you not just name your characters?
Yeah, because it's long enough. It's justified that we may have to start giving them names to help.
I totally, we're naming these girls.
So maybe we should just pop in and like start with the recap, because if we keep referencing these things, people are going to be really lost.
Yes, but I think we need to agree now that as we go through, we're going to name each fairy to kind of help us.
Everyone will
remind ourselves which one is which.
All right. So the first half we've covered in previous videos. I think you guys are pretty familiar with it by now. Anyone who's watching, if this is like your first video,
go back and watch.
Go back and watch those for the depth, but you probably are familiar enough with the story of Beauty and the Beast that you get the idea. So Belle has gone back to visit her family. She's come back to the Beast, kind of deciding she's going to accept his proposal, or at least consider it. Her father has talked to her. This lady in her dream has talked to her. She's kind of missed him while she's been gone. She finds him nearly dead. She revives him. She accepts him. And then we had a problem with this in one of the originals where she just kind of sits around and waits all day, right?
Yeah.
For him. In this one, she actually does look for him.
She does, but then she kind of realizes, oh, he only ever appears to me at 9 o'clock. Kind of, I have to wait. So then she sits and waits. And that makes more sense, that she's kind of like, okay, I'm waiting. And then the appointed hour comes like, where is he? I have waited all day. Where is he?
Yeah, she's
And that's when she discovers him, comatose by the river, where he's tried to starve himself to death.
yes. So she accepts him. The handsome prince in her dream comes and says, "Oh, I'm so happy you've set me free." And she's like, "Well, gee, thanks. Like, I'm marrying this beast and you're happy you're free." And then she wakes up and sees the prince asleep on the couch. And she's like, "Oh, wait. Maybe this is a thing."
Yeah. So, but it was very much a case of, duty and gratitude as the basis of marriage, even though her own inclination was for the handsome prince, as in she actually liked the prince, but okay, she owed a lot to the beast. So kind of everyone was saying, well, you owe him, and kind of that's a debt you can't ignore. Accept the beast proposal. He really loves you, even though he's stupid and dull and ugly, but he's not cruel, kind of, and you owe him thanks. So kind of you should kind of just go with it. And because she's so virtuous that she understands her duty, she agrees to this. And that was the key to breaking the curse.
Yes.
That she would give up self-interest to save him, and she didn't even know that it would save him necessarily, because she thought it would save the prince, but she didn't think it would save the beast.
Exactly.
But it would make him happy, and her own happiness wasn't as important as repaying the gratitude.
So she, and then he's like sleeping Beauty on the couch, like she can't wake him up. So she's just kind of like, okay, what's going on? And then a carriage comes in. These two beautiful women come in. There's a fairy and the queen.
And the queen is the prince's mother, and the fairy, we're going to need to give her a name. What's her name going to be? Because she's got a lot of friends in this.
She spells aunt. Do we want to call her like the fairy aunt, or does she need like a name?
I think we need a name because it's going to get confusing.
All right, help us out, guys. What should we call this fairy?
What do we name a good fairy godmother?
Good fairy godmother / aunt. And the queen, maybe we should call her warrior queen or something for like what's coming later. Something.
So one of the things is, the queen, after her husband dies, takes over the leadership of the army. And because other neighbors were thinking, hey, king's dead, the country's, weak, now's the time to strike. And she goes, no, this is my country.
What is that?
And she leads the army against people. She gets rid of all of them. And no one questions her right to do this. No one questions her skill to lead. They just follow her to battle and cheer on her successes. And they're like, she's our queen and we'll follow her anywhere. It's like, wow. And yeah, I agree, Laura. We probably, yes, Sarah. The queen is Xena. We like this.
Xena now, love it. And then so Sleeping Beauties. We're gonna go with Flora.
I was gonna go Merryweather.
Okay, Merryweather.
The main one. Yeah, okay.
So we've got Xena the warrior queen, and then Merryweather the fairy. They show up, and the fairy says, "Look, this beautiful girl was willing to accept your son. The curse is broken. Isn't everything wonderful? I told you I would work it out."
And the queen's like, fantastic, darling. You're so beautiful. So who are the lucky parents who gave birth to such a beautiful princess? And she's like, oh, well, thank you, ma'am. But actually, I'm just a merchant's daughter. And the queen's face falls. And she's like, sorry, fairy, you said you'd sort things out. How can you like inflict a commoner on my son?
Yes,
but
you're debasing him by.
Yeah, I mean, and the fairy argues that she's virtuous, that she's shown all the qualities, or otherwise she couldn't have broken the spell. And the queen's like, nope, not happy. The prince wakes up and comes along and goes, mother, I love this woman. She agreed to take me even as a beast, and I'm no longer a beast. And then he starts pleading with the fairy, Merryweather, turn me back into a beast. She agreed to marry the beast. If that's the only way I can be with her, I'm okay being a beast. I'd rather that
and
be a prince without her.
Bella is saying, like, I don't want to cause any trouble. Like, I don't want to, come between you and your mother. She's willing to step back. And so we've got this major conflict going on.
I don't think Xena actually changes her mind. I think she's stubborn to the last until Merryweather just says, which is why you disappoint me, Yeah. Because you know what? She's actually the most eligible person. And kind of like, how dare you?
So then Merryweather launches into this enormous backstory of like, well, you think you know this is why Belle is actually kind of too good for you. Because she's the daughter.
But you first give the prince's backstory of how he had become the prince, and then it's like, so, okay, there's so many backstories, and they're so intertwined.
And we just gotta take them and...
I think it's probably better to tell them in the order in which, not necessarily the order in the book, but kind of the order in chronological order in which they make sense.
I agree.
So
buckle in.
many, many years ago, like 20 years ago, Meriwether's sister, who we'll call Flora, because she's, the sister, she fell in love with a human. And the human was the king of Fortunate Isle, who happens to be the brother of Queen Xena.
Yes.
Who's a queen because she married a king. She'd have been Xena warrior princess, when she was his sister. So the king of Fortunate Isle, King Fortune, we're going to rename the whole cast.
Or who has disguised herself as a shepherdess to experience.
Yeah. You just want to have a browse. Oh, look at this! Because one of the things about the customs of Fortunate Isle is that everyone was entitled to marry whoever they wanted, regardless of station, because all people were equal, and love was something to be celebrated. Now, in contrast to the Queen just having an absolute hissy fit about the thought of her son being sullied by this low-born marriage, given that she probably grew up on Fortunate Isle, particularly telling. But then the king meets this shepherdess, falls in love with her, and turns out she's actually a fairy, but she falls in love with him too, so she keeps coming back, and she becomes his queen, and she stays there, and she, puts blessings on everyone on Fortunate Isle, and everyone's excited. But here's the problem. Fairies are not meant to mingle with humans, they're not meant to play favourites, they're meant to go across the whole world to spread their fairy magic and goodness. And people started getting suspicious that all of her good deeds were kind of focused on this very small patch of the world. And, she was called to account for it. And there's this magic book. And in the book is written the ongoing activities of every fairy in real time.
Mm-hmm.
But no one ever looks in the book unless they have a reason to. And while she was there trying to say, no, it's fine. No, I don't have any particular favourites. No. An evil fairy, we'll call her Maleficent because it suits, goes up and says, let's look at this book. She's with a human! And the whole place erupts into, oh, you have debased our order. You have, made a mockery of how great we are, because she's, humans don't deserve us. We are so wonderful. And actually give him more than just your favor, but you're married him, you've had a child with him. This is dreadful.
Yes. Yeah.
And she argues for the leniency, and it seems like it's kind of going okay. But then the ugly, evil, grumpy witch Maleficent basically says, no, this cannot be stood for. And the magistrate presiding over it says, I agree, the punishment is banishment, you will be stripped of your fairy honours, you shall be incarcerated. Mm-hmm. So now she can't go home. Back at home in her palace, she had told her guards that she was basically meditating and not to be disturbed. But kind of 3 days go by and she's been locked in the room and she hasn't come out yet. She hasn't touched any food because she's not really in there. She's gone back to the fairy realm. But this was her excuse so that she wouldn't be discovered. And they open the door and they find she's gone. And then they don't know what to do. And they're thinking, well, do we tell the king that we lost her? The king is away fighting another war. Or could she have run away? But kind of, why would she run away? Everything is perfect here.
And harm her, everyone loves her.
Yeah. So they decide that the only way to basically protect themselves from, being blamed for her escaping or harm or whatever happened to her is to say she died of an illness. And it's very sad. And they'll just send word to the king that she was sick and then send more word to him, oh, she's dead. And, oh, sorry, you're too late, you're too far away, nothing you can do, never mind. And he comes back and it's like, my wife is dead. and they all mourn. And a couple of them go, we will never speak of this again.
Yeah.
So the child is now motherless, but the father absolutely worships the daughter because she's all that's left of his beloved wife. But so he believes his wife to be dead and believes himself to be a widow. But in reality, Flora's up in fairy jail.
Yes.
And Flora's asking Merryweather, will you just check on my husband? Is he okay? Just check on my daughter. Like, is she okay? And like, leave it be. But before we get to that, actually, because I missed an important point, which was the mother of all seasons, who was the magistrate of the case, said, it's your child is an abomination, so let her marry a beast. That she should be nothing more than the wife of a beast, this and that, and kind of how desperate her life will be.
Yes, which feels very Cupid and Psyche, right? We've got these kind of higher beings saying, no, really. So yeah, so she's been cursed to marry a beast. She's still like a baby at this point.
Yeah, she's only about 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So now, then, Maleficent decides to go and see what's all the fuss about. Goes and sees the King of Fortress Isle. Realizes he is incredibly handsome.
Yes.
Kind of understands now why Flora fell for him. But instead of saying, oh, maybe I was a bit harsh on Flora, poor thing, she goes, I want to marry him myself. I see no conflict of interest here that I've gotten his previous wife incarcerated, and I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, and she's like, I can be sneakier. No one will know. It'll be great. It'll be great. And so she, and this is where we're going to have an interesting, especially now
crossover.
Now that we've been for Maleficent, she goes and finds a human queen, puts her into a deep enchanted sleep.
So this human queen, her husband's been killed, she's been kicked out of her kingdom, but unlike Xena, she just basically goes, oh dear, I shall run away. And Maleficent catches her, whacks her off into sleep, assumes her form, and runs over to the King of Fortune and goes, oh, good sir, I am so bereft. My husband is slain, my kingdom taken. Won't you take pity on me?
Okay, so invites her to the court. She helps take care of the daughter, always with the goal, of marrying the king. He's just not interested at all.
But he notices that she's really good with the child, so he names her as the child's governess.
Yes.
He's like, okay, well, I've cleared the usurper out of your kingdom. You can go back. And goes, no, it's okay. How about you look after my kingdom for me? Because I just want to stay here and look after darling Beauty.
And so he agrees. And so meanwhile, Maleficent has gotten some courtiers on her side, saying, hey, you should tell the king he needs to remarry, and of course it should be me. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. And so,
because she's the queen of the neighboring kingdom, it would mean the kingdoms would unite. It'd be a big land grab. There's a lot of good reasons for it, except the king is still in love with his dead wife.
Yeah, so he says no. He keeps saying no. So she decides, oh, it must be the daughter.
Well, he actually says straight out, I will not inflict a stepmother on dear Beauty.
You're right.
Because why she is currently second in the kingdom only to me as my heir. Why would I put someone else ahead of her? Yes. Now, again, this attitude of, women having an important place and having rights is so different from Perrault's take of just kind of like women are disposable ornaments.
Yeah, I love it. I love the change of tone and just the empowerment here, because it's never questioned. He's like, no, she is my heir. I don't want to put anyone above her. We've got Xena over there fighting her war. We've got some really great characters here.
Yeah, and they're background characters, and their greatness is kind of just mentioned in passing. It's no big deal. Of course, the Queen is leading the army. Of course, Beauty is my one and only heir, and I don't need a son. It was just very interesting compared to like Cinderella's father. Oh, I must immediately find a stepmother to look after my daughter because I couldn't look after her myself.
Yeah, no way could I do that.
So Maleficent then realizes that as long as Beauty's around, the king's not going to budge on this. So she decides, let's get rid of her.
Wow, we just gotta
Yeah.
The
So
time
she gets a couple of the loyal servants, um,
loyal to her.
and yeah, and they go off into the woods, and the idea is that they're going to smother the child, and then claim that she died, and they sent for help, and it was just too late, and it was all, and they planned that the husband was going to run back to the palace calling for doctors, and by the time they all arrived back, baby would be dead. Well, he wasn't going to leave until the baby was already dead. So
Yeah.
by the time he got back, oh my gosh, we're too late,
Yes.
to do the ruse.
But meanwhile, Merryweather has come to check in, and to see
Yeah.
what's going on, and is like, oh heck no. So she turns into, I believe it was a bear.
Yes, she assumes the form of a bear to frighten the the man and his wife from harming the child. But then she gets so enraged that they would have harmed her niece that she basically goes full bear on them and rips them to pieces.
Full bear.
Um,
Full bear. Oh yeah, Laura
and
makes a point. We've got some Snow White vibes here for sure.
true. And then she rips up the baby's clothes and like dips them in the blood of the two would-be killers, so it looks like the baby was mauled as well. And then she said there were two strokes of luck. One is that someone saw the bear attack and had run off to sound the alarm, so there was no question of it. And then two, Maleficent was kind of like, great, the accomplices are dead, there's no one who can tell my secret. She was convinced the baby was gone, didn't bother checking. She was sure her plan had worked, and she had been nowhere near, so there was no blame on her. So it was all fine. And Merryweather ran off with the child.
That's where we leave the Fortunate Isle. We come
Well,
back.
not quite, because let's go on with Beauty for the moment, but we have to come back to Fortunate Isle in a moment to finish off Maleficent.
Yeah, so we've got
so convoluted.
Guys, there's so much going on here. But we've got to follow Merryweather with Beauty. She's looking for a home for her. Just kind of, we've got to hide her amongst the humans.
And she finds this, like small cottage in the wood. It looks, reasonably respectable, well kept, but not too ostentatious. She didn't want to be in a big city or a palace because that's the first place she'd come to attention of Maleficent. Because Maleficent was still pretending to be a human queen, so she'd had contacts. She finds this house where there are three women watching the cradle, and she looks into the cradle. Obviously, the child is sick, and she's going to cure the child and then hope that out of gratitude they'll take another child as well. But she discovers the child has already died. And then she has this plan to switch the babies. So she takes away the dead child and buries it, and leaves in its place Beauty in the cradle. So the women wake up the next morning, the baby is miraculously cured and better than they could have ever hoped, and everything's wonderful.
It's worth noting she's 3 years old at this point.
Yeah.
They probably noticed it was a completely different child, but that's neither here nor
there. Yes. But it's very much a changeling story, like the half-bay child replacing the human baby.
Literally a fairy has come out and changed your baby, right?
But she didn't kill anybody to make it happen. It was like the child was already dead. So these were the nursemaids, and they brought the child back to the rich merchant. Merryweather disguises herself to kind of check that the women do take on the baby, and they're like, and they say, "Oh yes, good lady, of course, have a bed for the night, and it's wonderful news. The child has been restored. We'll bring her back to her father now in the morning." And then they bring them back, and she disguises herself again to be a gypsy lady to kind of turn up in the house and say, "Is he okay?"
Yeah.
But the father takes one look at this beautiful child and says, "I am blessed that a child has returned to me." Now, let's just say it's fairy magic that, a 3-year-old of a completely different family, like, you didn't notice that it was nothing like your children, but he accepts her as her own child. On the other hand, let's be honest, maybe 1700s men weren't actually that used to handling the baby. If the wife had died in... Yeah, I mean, it's... Maybe he was like, it's a girl? Probably mine. You said it's mine? Sure.
We'll take it. But yeah, also they've turned into a bear and switched forms multiple times. It's kind of a story about changing form. So
yeah.
We can give it.
So Beauty then goes into the family. She's accepted by everybody, except the older sisters are jealous of her beauty, but they don't ever suspect that she isn't actually their baby sister. So Merryweather is happy that her niece is taken care of. She's still bothered by the fact that her future, and she comes back and checks on her as the years go by, still bothered that she has this future where she has to become a beast's wife. But, that's in the future, and she'll work out a way to deal with that in time. But for now, she's just happy that Beauty is away from Maleficent, safe and doing well.
Right. Meanwhile.
So, back after the couple have been killed by the bear attack, Maleficent's back in court saying, "Oh dear, the baby's dead." So kind of there's no excuse now. Why aren't you marrying me? And the courtiers all do this and kind of say, yeah, you should get married. And the king turns around to her and in no uncertain terms tells her, "I will not be getting married again. And if I was, you would not be in consideration. Please get out of my kingdom, go back to your own. That is a request, but if you do not comply, it will become an order." She's just like, "Okay, you're kicking me out. I thought you were going to marry me." She is not impressed by the rejection. And being an elder fairy has a lot of power, and she's very annoyed. But previous to this, she was also godmother, self-appointed godmother to the prince, who is the king's nephew, Queen Xena's son.
Yeah, so while Xena is off fighting,
she was left in charge of the son, but she ignored the son in order to run after King Fortune. But when King Fortune says, "You have no hope now or ever," she says, "Right, I suppose I better go back to the other guy and actually look after him." The only reason she was ever given the duty was she turned up to the Queen and said, "I want to look after your son." And the Queen's like, "I don't trust you as far as I can throw you." But then came to this very clever realization that if she insulted the woman and said, "You're not allowed," her son would be cursed.
Yeah.
And actually, maybe having a very powerful fairy on his side wouldn't be a bad thing. She was generally nice to the people who were nice to her. So kind of she let her have her way and she gave her son over to the care of a fairy she didn't really trust, because the alternative was that fairy would have a curse on the family.
Yeah.
Look how well that worked out for you, Queen.
Yeah. Right. Kind of a tough spot there.
Yeah, it's rock in a hard place and nothing good coming of it. So while the Queen is off fighting her war, she doesn't want to send the prince for the prince because, she's scared of him in war and she wants to look after him and all of that. But Maleficent then decides, well, if I can't have King Fortune, here's a lovely prince.
Yeah, he's grown up well.
Yeah. Now, despite the fact that she is too old to bear him children, too ugly to tempt him, all he really got is her magic. And he's like, "I'm not so interested because I'm an 18-year-old beautiful boy. Like, why would I be? I can have any princess in the world." So she doesn't take rejection well. We've already spotted this theme.
We've established this. And so he tries to kind of salvage the situation. He's like, "Well, I can't marry you without my mother's permission. Perhaps we should go see my mother." Again, he's never intending to marry her, right? He's like, and let me get some backup here. Let me get home. So they go, the Queen's on the battlefield, as she has been for, the past little while. Yeah, it's creepy because he was calling this fairy mom before, and then she's like, "Oh, don't call me mom."
I don't want to be thought of. I don't want you to think of me as your mother. I want to be your wife. And she's like, no.
Yeah, really creepy. It's also kind of Snow White vibes, in the versions where the stepmother goes after the prince. Lets Snow White's age.
Oh yeah,
you can see that here. But yeah, so the fairy pitches it to the Queen. The Queen is also like, no way is this happening. So then I like this because it establishes one, the prince is not a jerk for rejecting the beautiful enchantress. That we see so many versions. There's a clear backstory, clear history here.
That it was both for him sort of almost incestuous, but also she was incredibly hideous, and she was
and Greek mythology going on here.
Yeah, so there was like really good reasons for him to say no, and it would have been really weird for him to say yes. But of course, she's so up in herself that she doesn't see any of this, and she just says, "Right, well, you think you're so good? Let's see if someone's going to love you. If you're ugly, if you're stupid, you know, the only way you can be freed is if someone will come along and marry you out of duty, come thinking you're going to eat them and kill them and volunteer to turn up anyway, and then you know you've got to you can't talk to them, you can't be nice to them, she doesn't
Yeah.
prevent him from being nice, but he
Yeah.
can't be clever with them.
Yeah, sure that.
um
Yeah.
he can't charm her, he can't use his title, he can't use his money. He
Yeah.
basically has to be a complete brute and still get the girl to agree to marry him. And it's kind of like, ha, now don't you think you should have picked me?
I showed you. And tells the queen, if you tell anyone, he'll be a beast forever.
Yeah. So they weren't in any way allowed basically say, by the way, he's a cursed prince. If you agree to marry him, the spell breaks, because that will actually trigger the spell completely.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
they are, and so they send him off. We've talked about this before, wondering like, what was the second castle? It was a summer home. That's specifically mentioned.
So Merryweather, though, meanwhile, was trying to work out what was Maleficent up to, because she'd gone kind of quiet for a while after she got kicked out of Fortunate Isle. And then she decides to do exactly what Maleficent did to Flora, which was, let's read the book. And she's reading the book at the exact moment where Maleficent puts the curse on the prince. So Merryweather has the exact text, the exact clauses of the curse, and how it can be broken. And she's going, I've got a plan.
She's like, hey.
Because Beast.
Yeah.
I've got a girl cursed to marry a beast, who also is such a virtuous girl. I think I can make her meet all of these requirements, but they have to meet all the requirements. So then she goes and explains to the prince and the queen, guys, you need to follow my rules exactly. No deviations, because she's there trying to juggle all these different clauses and stuff. And if the prince was charming and sweet, he'd have broken one of the clauses, and therefore Beauty agreeing to marry him wouldn't count, wouldn't break the spell. And she had to agree to marry him because she had to marry the beast to fulfill her own curse. And it was so complicated. She was literally like playing chess in like 5 dimensions, trying to line up all the stories. And we finally find out, why was the rose so important?
Love
it wasn't.
It wasn't important at all. So Merryweather shows up one night.
She knows that Beauty has asked for a rose, which is,
She knows the father is out there. So she says, hey, Prince, like, there's a guy out in the woods. I'm going to kind of direct him your way. He's got a daughter that's going to work for you. The daughter's asking for a rose. He's going to pick a rose at some point, and you need to freak out and demand the daughter's life.
And she goes, I will lead him through the rose garden. As soon as he sees it, he'll think of his promise and he'll try and get one. That's when you give out to him and say, how dare you steal my roses?
She literally tells him, like, you hide in the rose garden. Like, just be there, be ready. I'm going to make this work.
And then she says, and demand that one of his daughters has to sacrifice herself for you. And tell him that you're going to eat him. I wouldn't do that. But you must tell him this.
Oh, yeah, and Laura brings up, the rest of the court has been turned to stone just to be sure they don't tell anyone and mess this up. So the fairy has turned them into statues.
Oh, yeah, because actually it was in the summer house that the curse was laid, not on the battlefield. And all the courtiers heard of it. So if they had spread the story, the curse would have been null and void and he'd been permanent. So she turns everyone to stone.
Yeah,
so that, again, is the idea of the statues that the sisters turned into in some of the other versions.
We have that statue thing from the beginning. And it's again kind of a Sleeping Beauty vibe. Like, everyone's just kind of out, and she's like, it won't count like as part of their life. They'll be as young when they wake up as they were.
And they're not aware of time passing. They're just
frozen. They're just statues. Which Beauty noticed the statues when she first came in, right? She's like, wow, there are a lot of statues in this place.
And they're very realistic looking.
Good. So we have the rose. The rose is picked. The beast follows instructions.
He says, oh, you must send a daughter. And she goes, well, he's got some sons as well, but tell him that you need a daughter. And like, he's got 6, but the other 5, they're too selfish. They definitely won't. Beauty's the only one who volunteers. So kind of we're seeming to give a choice of randomness, but actually there's only one possible outcome that can come of this.
Directed. It's all been planned.
So then Beauty comes and she's led to believe that she's going to be devoured on arrival. So, but she still willingly stays, and the Meriwether like tick, first hurdle passed. And then the beast must appear dull-witted, so therefore she's not allowed. She's like, you can't talk to her. I just want to say no, get away. And
a few times she literally like silences him with a spell. I think she's like, he's about to say something nice, like no.
Yeah, or clever, or indicate that he's not actually the stupid, dumb brute that he's meant to appear. So like, stop it! You're ruining my plan.
She does. I think she gives him the dream as kind of a concession for that. Like, here, you can be yourself in this dream, which just complicates matters. Like, I think Beauty would have, agreed to marry the beast much sooner if it hadn't been for these random dreams with a handsome prince.
Yeah, but you find out that the prince has actually been spending his time wandering around basically wherever Beauty's just been. So she leaves the room and he goes in and says, oh, this is what she was just watching. Oh no, the fairy gives him the spell of invisibility. So he can follow her around and basically be with her even though she's not aware of it, and he's not allowed to make himself known to her. Which again is why, if he's trying to win her over, would she only appear for a couple of minutes at bedtime? That makes no sense. But this is why, because he would let on that he wasn't stupid. So in Lang's version, it seems like he was stupid, but he was kind of aware of the deficiency. Whereas in this case, he's not stupid.
He just has to pretend.
But he has to be sort of slow-witted. And he's been in love with Beauty from the very start, and he kind of understood that she didn't feel the same. And it's all actually really nice when you're hearing kind of like how he's been dealing with the whole thing.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Yeah. And at one point, like, he's like about to confess all, and it's like, oh, Beauty, like, really, let me explain what's really going on. And Meriwether appeared, standing behind Beauty, and held a knife to her throat and said, listen, you will keep your mouth shut, or I will kill her now. You are not ruining my plan. And the beast, of course, went back to being stupid.
I want that retelling so much of just like where the fairies there the whole time. I've already like finished mine, but maybe another one. Because it's such a funny dynamic of her like trying to mastermind this, and he just like keeps almost messing it up. And then
it's like I'm not just trying to, but I think the real challenge for her is like it's not just your curse, okay? Right, you can choose to be a beast forever if you want, but you are not, ruining my niece's chance of happiness. You will do the job right.
Work out. Yeah, it's so fun. It's so much fun, and just clears up all of these.
So Beauty goes back home, as in the other versions. Spends too long, and the other suitors try to, get with her instead of the people they're meant to marry, and she's like, I'm getting out of here. She heads back to the beast, but a bit late, and he never really expected her to come back.
Yeah.
He was you say you'll be back in 2 months, but kind of we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 2 months comes and goes, and he's like, yeah, she wasn't coming back. Like, why would she? But Meriwether has put so many spells on him to preserve his life that he can't risk himself. He can't drown. So he does the only thing he can do. He stops eating, and he's literally starving himself to death because it's the only means he has. So that's how he's only got a day or two left. That's why the 2-month deadline mattered so much. It wasn't that the spell was about to fade. It was just literally that was the point when he realized she's not coming back.
Yeah, which
he gave up trying to live.
Yeah. So much more sense than like, oh, I faded away, because this is like, again, a really active, like really.
It was a choice he made because he thought that she had chosen to leave him.
Yeah.
And anyway, so then they're reunited and we're back in good time. But then we have a question. Well, what happened to Beauty's mother, Flora? Because clearly she's not been dead all this time like we thought. Meanwhile, before so honestly, I'm getting confused as to which order the revelations happen. But at some point during all of this, the king arrives with 16 attendants. It's like, Zena, sis, it's like, brother, Fortune, what are you doing here? I'm not quite sure. I just suddenly turned up at this castle I'd never seen before. What's going on? And Merryweather's like, hi, brother-in-law. I'm Flora's sister. This is your daughter. And he's like, my daughter's dead. Actually,
She's
funny
not.
story.
You can tell.
So then at the end of all this, so we now know about Beauty's background and how her parents are really a fairy and the king of Fortune Isle, and the prince and how his curse and how the two of them have nullified each other's curses. And the king goes, but what about my wife? Where's Flora? The next thing, Flora turns up and Merryweather goes, you're in prison. Like, what? It's like, well, let me tell you my story. So Merryweather has made some references to the rite of serpents. And basically to call the serpent is a ritual among the fairies, which gives you immense power, but is incredibly risky. And when you reach 1,000 years, you become an elder and you have certain autonomy. But if you've done the serpent ritual, you've even more power. So because Maleficent was an elder, it was hard to go up against her directly.
Yes.
Because Merryweather and Flora were not elders. They were just regular fairies. Now, during Belle's time with the merchant, Merryweather becomes an elder. So she's now reached her 1,000 years. But then she decides to undergo the serpent trial herself, and she gets a lot of power. So we have some idea of what the serpent trial is. Then we find out that the Queen of the Fairies had a daughter by some sage, almost a godlike character, and it was a huge honor that he had chosen to mingle with the Fae. But he was adamant that his daughter, when she reached 100, should do the serpent rite, because like he didn't want her to wait until 1,000 to have kind of the power of the elders. And her mother's freaking out because she's like, but it's really dangerous. She's only 100. I don't really want to put her through this. You know, what if I lose my beloved daughter? And in all of this, Flora's there sitting in jail going, well, okay, I've got nothing to lose. And she says, I'll do it. What? I'll do the serpent trial. And if I pass, she can have the power boost. If I fail, what of it? I'm rotting in jail. Like, it's no big deal. And the Queen's like, okay, I'll do it. And if you pass, clearly you're free and we're all good. And she does the trial and she's successful. And the daughter, the Queen of the Fairies, not the fairy who is a queen, Flora. This is where like there are too many fairies and they're all called fairy.
Yeah.
Gabby, some names, please.
Yeah,
not just descriptions. We need actual names if you're going to write a 200-page book.
That's fair.
So she then...
Flora is free.
So Flora is set free, but then she decides she's going to do the serpent trial a second time, but for herself. So now she's super powerful. She's free. She's also got this huge autonomy, which is basically, you know what? I'm so powerful. None of you are telling me what I can do or not do anymore. The Queen of the Fae is now my bestie because I saved her daughter's life. So yeah, you know what? Bye. I'm going back to my husband. So she turns up and she finds her husband, who's always loved her despite all this time, her daughter finally restored to her parents, and everything's happy. But Belle says, okay, parents, delighted, this is lovely, but there's a man who raised me, who I have considered my father. There are brothers and sisters who may not be blood, but I have felt that way about them. You know, I would like to include them too. So they're all transported to the palace, and the big party starts, and they get married. The brothers are truly delighted for her. The sisters all fake. Oh, that's wonderful, and no one's fooled.
Yeah, the suitors come along as well.
Yeah, they're brought along. They're kind of, oh, Belle. Oh, you're kind of marrying the prince, plus you're a princess, so you're like totally out of my league, even if you were interested, which you clearly aren't.
The sister.
But you know what? you still seem to be kind of fond of these sisters, even though they're not your sisters and they've never been nice to you. So if I marry her, I'll be like close to the throne. And they decide that this is good enough for them. So they do marry the sisters. So the sisters stop being so annoyed with Beauty for being beautiful. The father is quite happy. The merchant is quite happy to turn up because he's like the magic horse that brings it up. Oh, I know where I'm going. Hi, Beauty. I'm here. So he gets a high ranking place in court. So do her brothers. The sisters are, made a fuss of, and the prince and Beauty, they're like, do we have to go back? And Merryweather chastises them both and goes, "Come on, guys, you've got a duty to do. You're the heirs to two kingdoms, which you are now going to unite. You've got work to do. Okay, but every so often, could we come back here to some just have time by ourselves rather than our duty?" And they're like, "Yeah, we can sort that out." She leaves her magic genie to be their invisible servants, and the monkeys and the apes and all the animals that had been in the palace, they all stay and they're delighted to welcome back the prince and princess whenever they can. All the statues are restored, restored to life. No time has passed for them.
Sisters aren't turned,
No, it was like
sisters are not turned.
Yes,
everyone who was a statue is no longer a statue. Sarah mentioned, it's like the White Witch in Narnia, exactly. So
that's what I thought of too. Yeah,
they come back to life. Everything is happy.
Yeah, and
it's nicely wrapped up.
Yeah, there are no plot holes because it's a complete story.
Oh, it's delightful.
Having said that, while it's not exactly a hole, I kind of feel like the way she was telling the story, that this was like just one story in a much bigger world, a world of serpent rituals for the fairy court, of fairy politics, of what an elder versus a junior versus a serpent writer. You just mentioned these details as throwaway. We've had two queens have their husbands murdered and their kingdoms invaded. One fights back, the other asks for help from a neighboring country. Clearly these countries are intermarrying. What's going on? Who is this common enemy who keeps invading these countries? Which kingdom are they from? It feels like there's a huge backstory that could be going on here.
It's a massive world. You get this sense for sure. And she did write other novels. I know nothing about
But I don't think any of them were set in this same fantasy world.
But it's like there's some depth here. Like you could have this massive epic fantasy series around it.
The Fae and their, interference with the world. Because then Maleficent and Sleeping Beauty, she decides when she basically realizes that the king is never going to marry her, she wakes up Sleeping Beauty and says, right, by the way, here's what's been going on. So King of Fortunate Isle, he's helped. Your kingdom's back. You're in charge now. Here's a bit of advice, but stay away from him. And she leaves, and the queen's like, "Oh, okay. Well, I've just lost my husband, so that's okay. I'll just stay here and rule this kingdom." And I don't know that. I suppose after Merryweather tells a story, then King of Fortune realizes, oh, actually, maybe I should make friends with this neighbor because actually she wasn't the horrible harridan who was ruining my life.
It's fair. Yeah, I don't know. I just enjoyed this so much. And it's told very sparsely, right? No one even has names. But there's just so much going on. It connects so nicely. It's delightful. And Sarah mentioned Lucy and her Beauty and the Beast retelling.
I had a lot of feelings that actually, I don't know whether Lucy had read the original version of it or whether that was because she was mixing in other myths and so forth, because she's a lot of Greek influencing as well. But there was a lot, Sarah. I noticed that too. It felt, oh yeah.
I know, Laura always brings it. So we had all these snakes with the ogres.
Oh yes, of course.
And now we've got this. It was this snake ritual is so fascinating, and we get no more details about it than that. But
why a snake ritual? Why not just kind of an ascension ritual or something else? It feels like there's more to the story, but I'm like, where is the rest of it? It's not relevant to this story. It's not a plot hole in any way because it's just described. It's a it's a means of gaining magic, and that's sufficient explanation. But like, but I want to know more. This is
And again,
amazing.
it feels very Greek mythology to me, this idea of these quests and proving your worth, and if you complete this task, then you get this thing, and let me please, the higher ups, like the god or the elder fairy or whatever.
Yeah, and stone and snakes. We're also seeing Medusa here.
Yeah. Okay, so Medusa needs to show up. That's what if you fail the snake ritual, you become like Medusa.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's so much here, guys. It's
There's so much. Or based on another thing, you fail the snake ritual, you become a vampire, and you have to, because there's a version of vampire mythology that it's caused by venom, like a snake bite, and that kind of turns them to kind of half serpents, and that's why they're biting.
Yeah, like the fangs.
Yeah, they've got their fangs, and they secrete poison to subdue their victims, and all of that. So that there's a certain parts of vampire lore is about, well, it's not lore in terms of like original mythology, but a kind of more reimagined mythology of that there's a link with serpents and so forth.
Laura mentioned
Yeah,
fantastic, because you've got a lot of world to explore here if you're doing an East of the Sun, West of the Moon.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is, of course, that the start of it is so similar to the Beauty and the Beast story. But, kind of like the Eros and Psyche, it was Flora who was doing the tasks to get back to her husband. So she was seen as being unworthy of her husband, or rather that he was unworthy of her, so she was taken away. And that's very much the Eros and Psyche story, or the East of the Sun, West of the Moon. And then she has to do these tasks to prove her worthiness to the Queen of the Fairies to be allowed to return.
Yeah, and it's like, as I picture the series, I picture like just all, because we've got some Snow White elements, some Sleeping Beauty elements. It's one of those things where like all of the fairy tales are there and just like mashed together in like these really interesting ways, but they're all happening. Yeah, simultaneously. And then some mythology as well, right?
Because, what's a fairy tale without a little bit of Greek mythology thrown in?
Yeah. And then also like court intrigue with the fairy, we've got the like really fairy society element as well. Yeah, it's fantastic. I really loved this one.
Yeah.
As you said, there's no plot holes to pick apart. There's just things to say like, oh yeah, I loved that.
And I'd like more of it, please. Can I have the other 5 books in the series that you never wrote, damn you, Gabby?
I know, I'm curious to see like what her other novels are. Because this is like some pretty solid fantasy writing. Some pretty solid world building, which is not what you really expect from any author of this time period.
I actually really liked both the strength of her female characters, and I liked the snobbery of the Queen Xena saying, I can't accept her as my daughter-in-law. And then she's like chastened by the fact, oh my god, she's perfect. Because Cinderella, I always felt that was actually the next step. Like so you've married a scullery maid.
Yeah.
I'm glad she makes you happy, son, but how exactly is she meant to rule the kingdom? Yeah, Snow White, well, she's technically a princess, but, she's been living with 7 men for the last 10 years. I mean, is she really suitable a princess anymore? Like, I kind of feel that there would probably have been an awful lot more disapproving matrons giving out about a lot of the princesses. And it doesn't matter how beautiful they are, or how virtuous, or how kind and generous. It's kind of like,
yeah.
But can't you feel a pee through 20 mattresses? No.
It's a very like Perot versus Gabby, right? Because in Perot's world, as long as you're beautiful, it's all good. So that idea of, Cinderella.
Beauty is not enough.
She's lovely, but in this, yeah, beauty is not enough in this one. And Laura mentions, I'm so glad we took the plunge and like read the whole thing, because oh my god, yeah, this celebration would not have been complete without it.
But we were also saying that actually it was a happy accident that we started with Andy's version and ended with Gabby's, because if we had started with Gabby's version and then Andy's was like the chopped up retelling that left out all the good stuff. Kind of like, yeah, we've got nothing to say about this. This is rubbish.
Yeah, that would have killed it. So this worked out. This worked out well. And then another celebration. Laura mentions Happy Release Week. It's the 28th.
Thank you.
Yeah, yay!
Yes, my Beauty and the Beast. Cheers. Yeah, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, super excited. And then I just have to jump back.
Yes, no Amazon glitches, let's hope.
Yeah.
There's an entire statue garden.
Yeah, you're on to me, and you'll see more of them. So I have to be so careful. I'm like, don't spoil. But also, yes, the statues are a thing. There are several things that, like, I found these, and it's completely an accident because I hadn't read this before, this version, but I'm just like, oh, wow, that's a very good coincidence.
Yeah, I'm going to pretend I knew all about it.
I was a genius. There's some mythology things, too, that I will not mention until anyone has read the book because it would be an enormous spoiler. But, like, a few things that, yeah, we'll pretend that I knew beforehand. Oh, my gosh, guys. Oh, my gosh.
But I mean, I look at this book, it was kind of like, how many fairy tales there have we chalked up that they've mashed together, as you say? And I kind of, oh, that was kind of my plan for a series, mash some fairy tales together. Karen didn't read this one first, or I'd been kind of like, it's been done. I won't try that. That's too good.
Yeah, but no, it's a very Erica fairy tale because yours have so many. Oh yeah, Laura says she doesn't get it to avoid the spoilers. The comment, yeah, I try, but I just like once I start talking, I'm just talking, right? And I'm like, okay, we got to make sure no. But yeah, so Erica's book mashes all these together in clever ways. So yeah, reminiscent of that.
Yeah. I didn't even know about this. Like I thought I knew Beauty and the Beast. So it's like, I didn't. Fair enough.
I know this awkward moment where you're like, oh, I'm a fan. I'm like a pretty educated.
I feel like I know my topic. I've done my research. I'm like, whoops, missed one.
Did not know it. And I'll freely admit that. I'm just like, oh, wow. Like, I've just written a whole retelling. I mean, we both have. And then it's like, oh, snap. There was a lot more there.
Yeah, and like, maybe I'd have worked some of those details in had I known about them. But I didn't. So,
It's too late now. It's much too late now.
Though I do have a bit of a dream sequence in mind. So, yeah. Okay. Actually, got nothing to do with Beauty and the Beast dream sequence because I didn't realize it was part of the original until I read Annie's. Like, oh, so that's why they had that weird dream thing in some of the retellings I've read.
Yeah, tagline. We only thought we knew it. Yeah, there's a few retellings I've read where I'm like, oh, I see now.
Yes, yeah. I was like, oh, it all makes sense.
Oh man, this is so fun. Any final comments, guys, on our many discoveries? This has been more of a journey than I anticipated.
But we have spoken for an hour about this book. I mean, I know it's way longer than the others we've read, but there's just so much wonderful content in it.
Yeah, so this is normally, we pick it apart and we find these things like this one I genuinely liked. There's so much here, like the characters are developed nicely. I liked the relationship dynamics once we understood what was going on. I loved all the strong female characters.
I would have liked some names. I'd be interested to know if it was told from Meriwether's point of view, if you could rejig the timeline so it's more linear, and that you, knowing that there's a Beauty and the Beast portion coming up, but actually what you're seeing is, the massive game of chess to maneuver all the pieces together and not one curse to be broken, but two.
Yes, yeah.
And it's her job to pull all the people together in the right way at the right time. So, it'll work.
Yeah.
So you can actually see it growing from, so there's those. So you kind of, the spoiler. Oh, Beauty's actually a fairy princess. But, it could be a very interesting version of it because you get such a huge info dump at the end. You're kind of going, what?
Whoa, yeah. But also, yeah, it's a tricky, I thought about that narrative structure as well. Because I'm like, okay, but how would you do it the other way? Because
I think you'd have to do it on the basis of everybody knows the tale as old as time. So you don't need this suspense of how could Beauty fall in love with a beast? You're like, yeah, just take it as read that that's gonna happen, but here's why it happened.
Yeah.
And it's like the story behind the story.
There's so much, yeah. So yeah, I think at that point, Beauty and the Beast is just like, you know, this the part we think of is this like this small piece in this like massive puzzle. It is not what most people are gonna think of when they think of like reading a Beauty and the Beast book. But it does make a really, really interesting story.
It's kind of like a tale about the fairy godmothers and like their like at the fairy court, and like it'd be really good as a fantasy focused on the fairies as opposed to the humans are sort of incidental.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and that's the thing at the end, because they're all blessed by fairies, they all live a ridiculously long time and they're all super happy and life is wonderful. So
yeah, there's no like, I mean, it does mention like, okay, they're humans, eventually they do die, but yeah, they have these very long extended lives because they're so surrounded by magic. And yeah, it's just charming, it's just delightful.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most positive we've been about a story, right? You guys know we're not afraid to rip it to shreds.
But I think we kind of ripped it to shreds, like through Andy's version. Like, there are so many plot holes. Like, oh, there was an explanation. It's all good.
It all makes sense. I know. I feel slightly bad about that now with those comments, but we didn't know. So
no. I think they're so valid because Andy did a rubbish job at his cutting and pasting when he left out key details.
That's fair.
Off the plot holes, but that is on him.
Yeah, that's fair. That's on him. And so we just thought it was, you know, we've seen.
Apologies to Gabby.
Yeah,
we got it wrong. We are now putting blame squarely with Andy.
Yes.
There it belongs.
Gabby, you're wonderful. Gabby's got it.
Gabby, you're wonderful. You're our new queen of fairy tales.
Yes, yeah. New favorite.
And seeing as so few women of classical era wrote fairy tales, other than basically you, I don't think you're losing your crown anytime soon.
For sure. All right,
I think we shall wrap that up as our final trip through Beauty and the Beast's various incarnations, from classical to mythology to chopped up retellings.
Yeah, too long.
So we're taking a break next weekend because Saturday of next weekend is Halloween and we'll be wrapping up our BC celebration. So we're going to take a break on Sunday and then we'll announce another topic for the week after.
And on Halloween, we have another giveaway, so watch for that. And make sure you check in. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching and commenting and reading along with us. You've made this so much fun. It's
been a wonderful thing, not just tonight, but for the whole month. You make it so great, so thank you.
Yeah. All right, so that wraps up our Beastly Celebration videos. Bye, everybody.
Take care.